stomach by Satan's knuckles? Does anybody know what it feels like this morning to get hit in the head by Satan's knuckles? Does anybody know what it feels like for the devil to walk right up to you and bust you right in your mouth and knock you down on your back? Does anybody know what it's like for Satan to give a knife to somebody else and they slam you in your back and you thought they had your back all the time? It is interesting that the Greek word for thorn here means that the knuckle was like taking a stake and sticking it in Paul's flesh. This means that Paul woke up with his thorn. This means that Paul went to bed with his thorn. This means that Paul preached with his thorn. This means that Paul taught and ministered with his thorn. Oh, we are no better than Paul. We, like Paul, are often forced to live with our thorn. We have to wake up with our thorn. We have to go to bed with our thorn. We have to go to work with our thorn. We have to come home with our thorn. We have to sing in the choir with our thorn. We have to preach the gospel with our thorn. And when we go to work tomorrow, we got some haters at work. We have to work with our thorn. Look at your neighbor and say, got to deal with it, got to deal with it. This is like Paul. God uses thorns to balance our lives. Parents, no matter how much you love your children, sometimes you got to tell them no, and sometimes you tell them yes, and you're teaching them balance. The Lord knows how to balance our lives. Listen to what Dr. Warren Worsley says. If we only have blessings, we may become big-headed. All right. So God permits us to have burdens to keep us humble. Paul's great experience in heaven could have ruined his ministry on earth. So God gives him a thorn from the devil to make Paul realize you still have to depend on me. God balances our lives so that we will still depend on him. I don't care how big you get and how much money you have and how good you look. You still got to depend on the Lord. Evangelist Wright already told you, if it had not been for the Lord on your side. Anybody this morning depending on the Lord? I said, is anybody this morning depending on the Lord? I said, is there anybody in the house this morning depending on the Lord? Paul was suffering. Look at what words it says. Suffering is a tool that God uses to build godly character. Certainly Paul was a good Christian, but God was still developing his character. God can use the ways and the billows of life to polish us if he chooses so. Oh, how many of you know this morning that God will do some polishing work in your life? Whatever's not right in your life, God will come in and clean it up. I said, whatever's not right in your life, God will come in and clean it up. Let me tell you something. Sometimes we know that it needs to be clean and we won't do it, so God let us go so far before he steps in. Paul never tells us what his thorn was. The Bible never tells us what Paul's thorn was. Scholars have argued endlessly about what the thorn could have been. Many theologians believe it was a severe form of malaria that would attack Paul occasionally. But other scholars, and I side with them, they refer to Galatians 6:1 that Paul perhaps had a bad eye ailment, because he says in Galatians, I have to write with large letters when I write you with my own hand. You remember Paul was blinded by God on the road to Damascus. His sight was restored, but many scholars believe that from time to time he had an eye ailment. But the issue is not what his thorn was. The issue is, like Paul, we all have thorns. We all have something that we have to live with. Post-breast